project, could you tell us something about your personal or professional influences?
Well, I suppose the personality who was very instrumental to start off with was Henry Schapper. Henry was in the early 1950s, the Reserve Bank had funded a number of agricultural economist positions in the various universities. I guess the big name was Keith Campbell in Sydney, and Jack Makem in University of New England, Frank Jarrett in South Australia. Henry Schapper was appointed as I think he was a research fellow, but he became a reader later on, and he was a very provocative guy. He didn't write academic papers so much as create agricultural institutions, and he was a great deal. He was very provocative, a great fellow to work under, and I'd say he sort of turned me on. Then Earl Heady was a very analytically influential guy. He kind of, I think he got agricultural economics worldwide into the mainstream of microeconomic analysis. He was very quantitative, very statistically and operationally research oriented, and he was a very nice guy too. I went over to the United States on a scholarship from Western Australia, which was at that stage more designed for the United Kingdom, which was a much cheaper place in which to study, and the Americans were very generous, and after I'd been there a year and a half, I got onto some quite good money there, which saw me through, and Heady was a very strong influence on my life. Yeah. So I think they were the two personalities that probably were. I also studied in the United States with another Australian, John Dillon, who was a very vigorous guy, and the two of us were doing our PhDs at the same time. He was far more vigorous and outgoing than I was, but we worked well together. We actually did a bit of work together, published a couple of papers on Australian fodder conservation problems while we were in America. He then went back to the University of Adelaide, where he was for a while, and then went on to a chair in the University of New England, where he was very influential in the Australian scene for many years. So he was, I would say, another very strong influence. Another influence who I had as a young student here was a flamboyant guy called Bruce Davidson, who was a bit of a wild card, and he really got stuck into agricultural policy about the development of the north and irrigation generally, where he kind of I think he blew holes in some of the myths about irrigation and the benefit costs of it. And he was a lot of fun to work with. He was here with us in Perth for a couple of years, and then himself went on to the University of Sydney, where he worked in the school there. So he was also another influential fella. They were all very different individuals, these people, and I think that was part of the fun of being an agricultural economist at the time. I was fairly quantitative and probably didn't have all the life experiences that some of these other people had, but those life experiences developed I think in that year. So I had 10 years in the University of Western Australia, and then through a variety of circumstances moved on to Canberra, where I work with what is currently called the Productivity Commission. But
what was it called then?
It was, well, it was the Whitlam years, the beginning of the Whitlam years, and the Whitlam had commissioned a study where he wanted to transform a pre-existing body called the Tariff Board, which had largely dealt with tariffs and with manufacturing industry. He wanted to transform that into a body that was more concerned with all forms of assistance to all types of industry, primary farms, mining, services, and I just went over for 6 months to get some work going in agriculture, and they made me an offer I couldn't resist. And so for the next 20 years I was a commissioner in what was then called the Industries Assistance Commission. Then in the 1990s they changed its name to the Industry Commission, and later it became what is now currently called the Productivity Commission.